24 hours. She had 24 hours to produce a miracle. The greasy scent of frying bacon and stale coffee hung in the air of the diner, a smell Maya once associated with survival, with tips that paid for rent and groceries. Now it smelled like failure. The rain hammered against the plate glass window, blurring the neon sign into a smear of red and blue light, each drop a tiny fist beating against her resolve. Her fingers were slick with sweat as she clutched the receiver of the diner's payphone, the cord a twisted lifeline to her only friend. "I don't know what to do, Chloe," she whispered, her voice cracking, a raw thing torn from the depths of her soul. "The judge, he said I needed to demonstrate a stable, two-parent household. He gave me until the hearing tomorrow morning. A husband, Chloe. He basically told me to find a husband by tomorrow, or Marcus gets full custody of Daniel," a sob caught in her throat, hot and sharp. It was a preposterous, impossible demand, a cruel joke disguised as jurisprudence. But the threat was real, a monster with sharp teeth tearing at the edges of her world. Her world was a 5-year-old boy with his father's dark hair and her own stubborn chin. Her world was everything. The diner was nearly empty, the late-hour stragglers hunched over their meals, oblivious. All except one. In the corner booth, a man sat with an unnerving stillness that commanded the space around him. He was an island of quiet dignity in the sea of clattering plates and buzzing fluorescent lights. He wore a pristine white thobe, the fabric a stark contrast to the worn vinyl of the booth, and a red and white patterned keffiyeh held in place by a simple black agall. He hadn't looked at a menu. He hadn't ordered. He simply sat, nursing a small cup of tea, his gaze fixed on the storm outside. But Maya felt his attention shift, a subtle change in the atmosphere, like the air pressure dropping before a storm. She felt his eyes on her back, not with idle curiosity, but with a focused, analytical intensity. Humiliation washed over her, hot and prickling. A stranger was listening to her life fall apart. She murmured a choked goodbye to Chloe and hung up the phone, her forehead resting against the cool, greasy plastic of the casing. The fight was gone. There was nothing left but a hollow ache where hope used to be. She turned, intending to flee to the relative anonymity of the kitchen, when a voice, deep and smooth with an accent that was both elegant and foreign, stopped her cold. "Excuse me." He was standing now, his height and presence seeming to shrink the already small diner. Up close, she could see the sharp, intelligent lines of his face, a face that belonged on a magazine cover or a corporate billboard. Not here. His eyes were the color of dark, rich coffee, and they held an unnerving depth, as if he could see straight through her desperation to the frantic, terrified heart beneath. "I do not mean to intrude," he said, his voice a low vibration that she felt in her bones. "But I overheard your predicament. You require a husband by morning." He stated it not as a question, but as a fact. A simple, solvable problem. Maya stared, speechless. A hysterical laugh bubbled in her chest. "Yeah, well, unless you know a guy who rents them out by the hour, I'm out of luck." The man's expression didn't change.
"No pity, no amusement."
Only that same unnerving, steady calm. "As a matter of fact," he said, his gaze unwavering, "I do. Me." It had started, as most nightmares do, with a dream. Marcus had been a dream. He was handsome, wealthy, a real estate mogul who swept into her life like a summer storm, all charm and expensive dinners and promises that glittered like the diamond he'd eventually slipped on her finger. He'd painted a future for her, a world away from double shifts and aching feet. He'd promised to take care of her. And he had, in his way. He'd taken care to isolate her from her friends, taken care to critique her clothes, her laugh, the way she spoke. He'd taken care to make her feel so small, so dependent, that the thought of leaving was more terrifying than the thought of staying. Daniel's arrival had changed everything. Holding her son, Maya had felt a strength she didn't know she possessed. A fierce, primal love that burned away the fog of Marcus's control. She saw the way he looked at their son. Not with love, but with a sense of ownership, another possession to be polished and displayed. That was when she knew she had to leave. The escape was a blur of frantic packing and a pre-dawn drive, leaving behind the gilded cage for a cramped, one-bedroom apartment and the familiar scent of diner grease. For 2 years, they had been safe.
Happy.
It was a small life, but it was theirs. Then Marcus had found them. He didn't want her back. He wanted to punish her. He wanted to take the one thing she loved more than life itself. He dragged her into a custody battle she couldn't afford, armed with a team of lawyers who twisted her escape into an act of maternal instability. They painted her as a flighty, unreliable waitress living in poverty, while Marcus was the pillar of financial security. The judge, a man who saw the world in dollar signs and neat, traditional family units, had listened. "Ms. Evans," he'd said, his voice devoid of sympathy, peering down at her from his elevated bench. "This court's primary concern is the stability of the child. Mr. Thorne can offer a life of immense privilege and, more importantly, a stable, two-parent household. You, on the other hand," he'd let the words hang in the air, a judgment already passed. "I am granting you a continuance. A final one. You will appear before me tomorrow at 9 a.m. if you cannot demonstrate a significant, material change in your circumstances, a change that proves you can offer the same level of stability. I will have no choice but to grant full custody to the father." He didn't have to say the words. "Bring a husband, a father for your son." It was a death sentence delivered with a gavel. The memory was a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs as she stood in the diner, the impossible offer from this impossible man echoing in the space between them. Maya's first instinct was to run. This had to be a joke, a cruel, twisted prank orchestrated by a universe that had clearly decided to make her its plaything. She looked for a hidden camera, for a sign of mockery in his eyes, but found only a disconcerting seriousness. "You can't be serious," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Her mind raced, cataloging the dangers. He was a stranger, a powerful, wealthy stranger, if his clothes and bearing were any indication. Men like him didn't do things for free. What would he want in return? The price would be more than she could pay. "I am entirely serious," he replied, his tone even and dispassionate, as if they were discussing the weather. "You have a problem. I have a solution. It is a simple transaction." Simple. There was nothing simple about this. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and a wild, traitorous flicker of hope. "Why?" she asked, the word raw. "Why would you do this? What do you get out of it?" A flicker of something unreadable passed through his dark eyes. For a moment, she thought she saw a shadow of an old pain, a ghost of a memory that had nothing to do with her. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the same cool, business-like demeanor. "My reasons are my own," he said. "Let us just say I have a personal aversion to men who use their power to torment women and children. Consider it a philanthropic endeavor. The terms are simple. I will become your husband on paper. We will present a united front to the court. My lawyers will handle everything. In return, you will owe me nothing. Once your son is safely in your custody, we will part ways. The marriage will be annulled. It will be as if it never happened." He spoke with such absolute confidence, such certainty, that for a dizzying moment, she almost believed him. He made the impossible sound plausible. He made a lie sound like salvation. But her life had taught her that salvation always came with a price. "I don't even know your name," she whispered, the last bastion of her sanity trying to find purchase. "Rashid Al Maktoum," he said, as easily as if he were saying John Smith. The name meant nothing to her, but she had the distinct feeling it should. He saw the confusion on her face. "It is not important. What is important is your son. The clock is ticking, Ms. Evans. Do you want to save him or not?" He laid the choice before her, stark and brutal. Her fear of him versus her fear of losing Daniel. There was no contest. The terror of a life without her son was a tangible thing, a cold dread that eclipsed everything else. Taking a shaky breath, she met his intense gaze. In the depths of his eyes, she saw not a monster, but a lifeline. A dangerous, terrifying lifeline, but the only one she had. "Okay," she heard herself say, the word tasting of surrender and desperation.
"Yes."
"Okay." A ghost of a nod was his only acknowledgement. He turned and walked towards the door, expecting her to follow as if it were the most natural thing in the world. For a beat, she was frozen, the reality of her decision crashing down on her. She was entrusting her entire world to a man she'd met 10 minutes ago in a greasy spoon diner. It was insane. It was suicide. But the image of Daniel's face, his small hand clutching hers, propelled her forward. She untied her stained apron, letting it drop to the floor, a symbol of the life she was leaving behind, and walked out of the diner into the rain and into the custody of Sheikh Rashid Al Maktoum. The car waiting at the curb was not just a car.
It was a statement.
A gleaming black Rolls-Royce, so silent it seemed to absorb the sound of the storm. A uniformed driver stepped out and opened the rear door, his movements crisp and efficient. The interior smelled of rich leather and something else, a faint, spicy scent of sandalwood and power. As Maya slid onto the impossibly soft seat, she felt like a stray animal that had wandered into a palace. The door closed with a heavy, satisfying thud, sealing them in a cocoon of profound silence, the city's chaos reduced to a silent movie playing out through the rain-streaked windows. Rashid sat opposite her, not looking at her, his attention on a tablet that had materialized in his hands. He tapped at the screen with an economy of movement, his face illuminated by its cool, blue light. The contrast between them was a chasm. Her worn jeans and thin jacket, still damp from the rain, felt like a beggar's rags against the opulent backdrop. He was pristine, untouchable. "My legal team is on their way to my penthouse," he said without looking up. "They will have the necessary documents. A marriage license, a prenuptial agreement which will state unequivocally that you waive all rights to my assets. It is for your protection as much as mine. It will prove this is not a union of financial opportunism, her protection." The idea was so ludicrous, she almost laughed. Every instinct screamed that she was in more danger now than she had ever been. He was a wolf, and she had willingly climbed into his den. Where are we going?" she asked, her voice small in the vast, quiet space. "To prepare," he said simply. The city flew by, a river of glittering lights. They moved from the gritty, familiar streets of her neighborhood to the polished, moneyed heart of the metropolis. The buildings grew taller, sleeker, their glass and steel facades piercing the stormy sky. The car pulled into a private underground garage, and they were ushered into a private elevator that ascended with dizzying, silent speed. The doors opened directly into a sprawling penthouse that was less an apartment and more a testament to unimaginable wealth. The floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of the storm-lashed city below, a kingdom of light laid out at their feet. The space was minimalist, decorated in shades of charcoal, cream, and brushed steel, with art on the walls that probably cost more than she would make in a lifetime. It was beautiful, sterile, and utterly intimidating. 3 people in sharp, dark suits stood waiting for them, briefcases at their feet. They were his legal team. They looked at her with polite, dismissive eyes. She was just another problem to be managed, a piece of paperwork to be filed. Rashid finally looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her from head to toe, a quick, dismissive appraisal. "First," he said, his voice clipped and authoritative, "we need to make you look like my wife." The next few hours were a dizzying, disorienting whirlwind. The penthouse became a command center, with Rashid at its epicenter, issuing quiet orders that were carried out with swift, flawless precision. Maya felt like a pawn on a chessboard, moved and manipulated by an unseen hand. The lawyers, a man and 2 women with faces as sharp and unforgiving as their suits, sat her down at a massive glass table. They presented her with a sheaf of documents thick enough to stop a door. The marriage license pre-filled, the man, Mr. Davies, explained, his tone dry. "We have an arrangement with a judge who is available for emergencies. And this," he slid a heavier document across the table, "is the prenuptial agreement. It is comprehensive." Maya's hands trembled as she picked it up. Legal jargon swam before her eyes, clauses and subclauses that felt like the bars of a cage, snapping shut around her. She saw her name next to Rashid's, a bizarre and terrifying union. She was signing away a life she never had, for a future she couldn't guarantee. She looked at Rashid, who was conferring with one of his aides across the room, his back to her. He was completely detached, this entire charade a mere business transaction for him. With a deep breath that did nothing to calm the frantic beating of her heart, she signed her name. Her signature looked small and shaky next to the bold, confident scrawl that would soon be his. No sooner had the ink dried than another team arrived. A woman with a severe haircut and a measuring tape, and 2 assistants wheeling in racks of clothing. They descended upon her, measuring, assessing, and murmuring in low tones. She was stripped of her worn jeans and faded t-shirt and dressed in a series of outfits, each more luxurious than the last. Silks and cashmeres whispered against her skin, fabrics she had only ever seen in the pages of glossy magazines. They chose a simple but exquisitely tailored navy blue dress, a string of delicate pearls, and low-heeled shoes that cost more than her rent. They styled her hair, taming its frizz into a sleek, elegant chignon, and applied makeup with practiced, impersonal hands, erasing the tired waitress and creating a polished, sophisticated stranger in her place. When they were finished, they turned her to face a full-length mirror. The woman staring back was not her. This woman was poised, elegant, her eyes wide with a carefully concealed panic. She looked like she belonged in this world of glass and steel. She looked like she could be Rashid Al Maktoum's wife. He walked over, his eyes scanning the finished product. He circled her once, his expression unreadable. He stopped in front of her, his proximity sending a jolt through her. He reached out, and she flinched, but his touch was surprisingly gentle as he adjusted the pearl necklace at her throat. His fingers brushed her skin, a fleeting, electric contact that made her breath catch. "Better," he said, his voice a low murmur meant only for her. "Now for the final piece. You cannot go into that courtroom as Maya Evans. You must go in as my wife. You must believe it. Your son's life depends on your performance." The morning air was thick with unspoken tension. They stood side by side in the elevator, descending from the stratosphere of his penthouse back down to the real world. The navy dress felt like a costume, the pearls a heavy weight against her collarbone. Beside her, Rashid was an impenetrable fortress of calm. He wore a perfectly tailored dark gray suit that made him look less like a sheik and more like a ruthless CEO, a predator at the top of the food chain. The silence stretched, filled only by the whisper of the elevator's descent. Maya's stomach was a knot of acid. She was about to walk into a courtroom and tell the biggest lie of her life. She was an actress in a play she hadn't rehearsed, with the most important audience of one, her son. "I can't do this," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. Her carefully constructed composure was cracking. Panic, cold and sharp, was beginning to seep through. Rashid didn't look at her, but she felt his focus shift entirely to her. "Yes, you can," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. "You are a mother fighting for her child. There is no stronger force on this earth. Do not think of it as a lie. Think of it as a weapon. It is the only one you have against a man who uses his money as a club." The elevator doors opened to the pristine, silent garage. The Rolls-Royce was waiting, the driver holding the door. As she moved to get in, Rashid put a hand on her arm, stopping her. He turned her to face him, and for the first time, the mask of cool detachment slipped. His dark eyes were intense, boring into hers, and she saw something there that wasn't about business or transactions. It was something deeply personal. "He will try to provoke you," Rashid said, his voice low and urgent. "Marcus. He will say things to make you angry, to make you look unstable. He will try to unmake you in front of the judge. You will not let him. You will look at him, and you will feel nothing but pity for a man so small he must steal a child to feel powerful. You will look at me, and you will remember that you are not alone. Do you understand?" She could only nod, her throat tight. He held her gaze for a moment longer, a silent communication passing between them. It was a promise of support, a strange and unexpected alliance. He was no longer just a benefactor. He was a co-conspirator, a partner in her desperate gambit. As they drove towards the courthouse, the city waking up around them. Maya felt a subtle shift inside her. The terror was still there, a cold stone in her gut, but it was no longer all-consuming. It was joined by a fragile, tentative sliver of hope, placed there by the strange, powerful man who had appeared in the wreckage of her life and offered her the world in exchange for a single lie. She was still terrified, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely alone. The courtroom was exactly as she remembered, cold, impersonal, and smelling of old paper and fear. Marcus was already there, sitting beside his lawyer, a man with the predatory smile of a shark. Marcus looked smug, confident. He shot her a look of triumphant pity, his eyes flicking over her old, worn coat before he caught sight of the man entering behind her. The change in his expression was instantaneous. The smugness evaporated, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then disbelief. He didn't know who Rashid was, but he recognized power when he saw it. The air in the room shifted. The clerk, the bailiff, even Marcus's shark-like lawyer, everyone turned to look. Rashid moved with an unhurried grace that commanded attention. He guided Maya to their table with a light, proprietary hand on the small of her back, a gesture that was both reassuring and a clear statement of ownership. Mr. Davies, Rashid's lawyer, was already at the table, arranging his files with chilling precision. He gave Maya a brief, confident nod. The judge entered and they all rose. "Mr. Thorne, Miss Evans," Judge Miller said, his tone weary. "We are here to finalize the custody arrangement for Daniel Thorne. Ms. Evans, the court granted you a continuance to demonstrate a material change in your circumstances. What do you have to report?" Before Maya could speak, Mr. Davies stood. "Your Honor, my name is Simon Davies. I am representing Mrs. Al-Maktoum." He let the new name hang in the air. A ripple of shock went through the room. Marcus shot to his feet. "Objection. Her name is Evans. What is this nonsense?" The judge banged his gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Thorne." "Mr. Davies, please explain." "Certainly, Your Honor," Davies said smoothly. "My client, Maya, was married yesterday evening to my other client, Sheikh Rashid Al-Maktoum. We have filed the marriage certificate with the county clerk this morning." He slid a document across the table to the clerk. The judge stared, dumbfounded, at the paper and then at the impossibly handsome, powerful man sitting next to Maya. Marcus's lawyer whispered furiously in his ear, but Marcus was pale, his bravado gone. "This is a sham," he sputtered. "She was a broke waitress yesterday. This is a trick." "A trick, Mr. Thorne?" Davies countered, his voice like ice. "Or perhaps a private matter you are not privy to. My clients have known each other for some time. They chose to formalize their union in light of your aggressive and unwarranted legal action to provide the stable, two-parent household the court requires for their son. The words hit Maya with the force of a physical blow. Rashid's hand found hers under the table, his grip firm and steadying. It was the anchor she needed. Marcus's lawyer recovered quickly. "Your Honor, this is absurd. We have no information on this. Mr. Al-Maktoum. For all we know, he could be anyone. We need to ascertain his financial standing, his background." Mr. Davies smiled a thin, dangerous smile. "I would be happy to provide the court with my client's bona fides, Your Honor. Sheikh Rashid Al-Maktoum is the CEO of Maktoum Global Investments, with controlling interests in telecommunications, shipping, and real estate across 3 continents. His personal net worth is, to be conservative, in the 10-figure range. He has homes in London, Dubai, and a penthouse here in the city. He has no criminal record and is a noted philanthropist. Will that suffice for now, or would you like me to continue?" A stunned silence filled the courtroom. Marcus looked like he'd been punched. The judge stared at Rashid, his expression a mixture of awe and intimidation. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been completely annihilated. Rashid leaned towards Maya, his lips close to her ear. "Pity him," he murmured. And looking at Marcus's deflated, impotent rage, she finally did. The judge cleared his throat, his entire demeanor transformed. The weary condescension was gone, replaced by an almost fawning respect. "I see," he said, shuffling papers on his desk.
Well,
This certainly constitutes a material change in circumstances, Marcus's lawyer tried to argue, bringing up Maya's past, her instability. But Mr. Davies dismantled every point with cold, irrefutable logic and a mountain of counter-documentation they had seemingly prepared overnight. He presented affidavits from teachers praising Maya's involvement at Daniel's preschool. He produced a lease agreement, signed that morning, for a sprawling 3-bedroom apartment in the city's best school district. He even had a letter from a renowned child psychologist, attesting to the strength of the bond between Maya and her son, based on a consultation that had never happened. It was a masterclass in legal warfare, a blitzkrieg of wealth and influence that left Marcus and his lawyers sputtering in the dust. An hour later, the judge banged his gavel. In light of the new circumstances, he declared, avoiding eye contact with Marcus, it is clear that the mother is now in a position to offer a stable and secure environment. I award full and sole custody of the child, Daniel, to his mother, Mrs. Maya Al-Maktoum. The name still sounded alien, but the words sole custody were the most beautiful sound Maya had ever heard. Relief washed over her in a wave so powerful her knees went weak. It was over. She had won. Daniel was safe. Daniel was hers. She turned to Rashid, her eyes swimming with tears, a frantic, grateful thank you on her lips, but he was already standing, his face impassive, as if he had just concluded another business meeting. The drive back to the penthouse was surreal. The silence that had been tense on the way there was now something else entirely. Awkward, charged, and uncertain. The deal is done. He had fulfilled his end of the bargain. What happened now? Did she just thank him and walk out the door, back to her old life, albeit with her son secure? The thought was jarring. In less than a day, her world had been turned upside down and then righted again by this enigmatic stranger. Back in the penthouse, the legal team was gone. The racks of clothes had vanished. It was just the two of them, standing in the vast, silent living room, the city spread out below them. I don't know how to thank you, Maya began, her voice thick with emotion. You saved my son's life. You saved my life. Rashid walked to the window, his back to her, his hands clasped behind him. It is done. You are safe. That is all that matters. So what now? She asked, the question hanging between them. Do I just leave? He was silent for a long moment. The apartment is yours, he said, his voice distant. For as long as you need it. I have also arranged for a trust to be established for Daniel's education and your living expenses. You will not have to worry about money again. It was more than she could have ever dreamed of. It was freedom. It was security. But it also felt like a dismissal, a final payment for services rendered. The lie they had told was supposed to end at the courthouse doors, but Maya felt a strange, unwelcome pang of disappointment at the thought of it being over. This man had been her savior, her partner, her pretend husband. And now he was once again a stranger. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. She turned to leave, to walk out of his life as quickly as she had entered it. Maya, he said her name, and she stopped, her hand on the door. He had turned from the window, and his eyes were fixed on her, that same intense, unreadable expression on his face. This is not over. A man like Marcus Thorne, men who believe they own people, they do not accept defeat gracefully. Be careful. The warning echoed in her mind for the next 2 days. She moved into the beautiful new apartment, a place so large and luxurious it felt like a hotel. Daniel was thrilled, racing through the hallways and bouncing on the plush sofas, his laughter filling the empty spaces. For the first time in years, Maya felt herself breathe. The constant, grinding fear that had been her companion for so long had receded. She had Rashid to thank for that, the mysterious sheik who had vanished from her life as abruptly as he had appeared. There had been no word from him since she'd left his penthouse. His security was a silent, invisible presence. A car was always waiting for her, and groceries appeared as if by magic. It was a gilded cage, but a safe one. On the 3rd day, she decided to retrieve the last of her and Daniel's things from their old apartment. She left Daniel with a sitter, another service Rashid's staff had arranged, and took the car to her old neighborhood. The building looked shabbier than she remembered, the air thick with the smell of damp and cooking cabbage. A wave of nostalgia, mixed with relief, washed over her. That life was over. As she unlocked the door to her old apartment, a prickle of unease ran down her spine. The door creaked open, and the breath caught in her throat. The small apartment had been ransacked. Furniture was overturned, drawers were pulled out, and the few possessions she'd left behind were strewn across the floor. In the center of the room, scrawled on the wall in what looked like red spray paint, were 2 words. "You're mine." Her blood ran cold. It was Marcus. He was here. A floorboard creaked behind her. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Marcus stood in the doorway, blocking her only exit. His expensive suit was rumpled, his face was pale and unshaven, and his eyes held a wild, desperate gleam she had never seen before. This wasn't a smug, controlled man from the courtroom. This was a man who had lost everything, a man with nothing left to lose. "Did you think it would be that easy?" he hissed, taking a step towards her. "Did you think you could take my son and humiliate me with your pet chic, and I would just walk away?" "Marcus, leave," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "It's over." "The court decided." "The court," he laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "The court knows nothing.
You are mine, Maya.
And Daniel is mine. If I can't have him, no one will." He lunged for her, and she stumbled backward, her hand fumbling in her purse for her phone.
He was faster.
He grabbed her arm, his fingers biting into her flesh like a vice. He spun her around, pressing her against the wall, his face inches from hers, his breath sour with alcohol. "You will call off your lawyers," he snarled. "You will tell the judge you made a mistake. You belong to me." Panic seized her, suffocating and absolute. She opened her mouth to scream, but the sound was cut off as the apartment door flew open with a deafening crack, splintering off its hinges. Rashid stood in the doorway. He was no longer the polished businessman from the courtroom. He was dressed in casual black trousers and a shirt, but he radiated an aura of pure, lethal menace that was more terrifying than any suit. His eyes were not the color of coffee now. They were black, cold, and utterly devoid of mercy. He looked at Marcus's hand on Maya's arm, and his face became a mask of controlled fury. "Let her go," he said. The 2 words were spoken quietly, almost conversationally, but they carried the chilling finality of a death sentence. Marcus, momentarily stunned, just stared. Then, with a surge of foolish bravado, he tightened his grip on Maya. "Get out," he spat. "This is between me and my wife." Rashid moved. It wasn't a rush, it was a fluid, impossibly fast motion. One moment he was in the doorway, the next he was on Marcus, his hand clamped around Marcus's throat, lifting him off his feet and slamming him against the opposite wall with a sickening thud. Marcus choked, his eyes bulging, his hands clawing uselessly at the steel grip cutting off his air. "She is not your wife," Rashid snarled, his voice a low, guttural sound of pure rage. "She is my wife. And you will never touch her again." The transformation was terrifying and complete. The calm, detached billionaire was gone, replaced by a warrior, a predator whose power was not just in his wealth, but in a raw, physical capability that Maya never could have imagined. He held Marcus against the wall, the man's feet dangling inches from the floor, his face turning a mottled purple. 2 other men, dressed in discreet security attire, appeared silently in the doorway behind Rashid, their presence a final, grim punctuation mark on the scene. Rashid's voice dropped to a lethal whisper, meant only for Marcus. "You have made a grave error. You thought she was alone and unprotected. You will learn that she is the most protected woman in the world. You will disappear from her life. You will forget her name, and you will forget your son's name. If you ever come near her again, if you even think her name again, the consequences will be permanent. Do you understand me?" He gave Marcus a slight shake, and the man nodded frantically, terror finally breaking through his rage and entitlement. Rashid held him there for a moment longer, his dark eyes burning with a cold fire, before dropping him. Marcus collapsed to the floor in a boneless heap, gasping and sobbing for air. Rashid didn't give him a second glance. He turned to Maya, his expression softening as he took in her pale face, and the red marks already forming on her arm where Marcus had grabbed her. The rage vanished, replaced by a deep, aching concern. He reached out, his hand gently touching her cheek, his thumb stroking away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice now gentle, the storm having passed as quickly as it had arrived. She could only nod, her entire body trembling with adrenaline and shock. He had saved her. Again. Not as part of a deal, not as a transaction, but because he had been watching over her. He had kept his promise. He led her out of the ruined apartment, his arms securely around her shoulders, shielding her from the sight of his men efficiently and dispassionately hauling a whimpering Marcus to his feet. As they stepped out into the clean, rain-washed air, the world seemed to settle back on its axis. The immediate threat was gone, neutralized with a terrifying finality. They were left in the aftermath, standing on the sidewalk, the silence between them filled with everything that had just happened. The lie of their marriage had been forged in desperation, but in that moment of violent, absolute protection, it had felt real. He had called her his wife, and the words had been a shield. He had defended her not as a client, but as something precious. The wall between them, the one built of money and circumstance and secrets, had been shattered. All that was left was the raw, undeniable truth of what they had become to each other. He turned to her, his dark eyes searching her face. "He will not bother you again," he said, a vow. "I know," she whispered. Then, gathering every ounce of courage she possessed, she asked the question that now mattered more than anything else. "Rashid, why did you really do this?" He looked away, towards the skyline of the city he seemed to own, and for the first time, she saw true vulnerability in his eyes. "A long time ago," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of memory, "I failed to protect someone I loved. I was too young, not powerful enough. I swore I would never let that happen again. When I heard you on the phone, I heard an echo of the past. I saw a chance not to change what happened, but to honor memory. To do for you what I could not do for her." He finally looked at her, his heart in his eyes. "It started as a promise to a ghost, Maya. But it has become something else entirely. It has become about you." And in that moment, under the gray city sky, Maya knew that the greatest lie of her life had somehow led her to the most profound and unexpected truth. Her pretend husband had become her real protector, her partner, her hope. Their story had begun in a diner, a transaction born of desperation, but it would not end there. It would be a new beginning, built on the ashes of their old lives, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most impossible miracles are the ones that are real.